The French military was so focused on maintaining their traditions and customs rather than preparing for the Second World War. But why was this? Germany took over France in 1940 in a campaign known as the Battle of France. The campaign began on May the 10th and ended on June the 22nd, so it took approximately 6 weeks to take over the whole of France. The swift defeat of France is often attributed to a surprise attack through the Benelux, but there was deeper reasons behind their vulnerability. In this analysis, we will explore the key factors that contributed to France's defeat in 1940, including economic struggles and a conservative military philosophy. Additionally, we will compare the military equipment of Germany and France to determine if this played a significant role in the outcome of the war. To begin, let's examine the state of the French army from 1918, the end of the First World War, to 1936, a period marked by a gradual decline in French military strength. After World War I, France experienced a loss of experienced and educated officers, which was not uncommon after a war. However, the French government and military leadership falsely believed that a lasting peace had been achieved and the League of Nations would prevent future conflicts. The League of Nations, established in 1920, was the first intergovernmental organisation established to promote the international cooperation and to achieve international peace and security. It is often referred to as the predecessor of the United Nations. As a result of these perceptions, massive military budget cuts ensued, and service training was gradually reduced from 3 years to just 1 year. These budget cuts were largely the result of a dire economic situation France faced after the First World War. The country was nearly bankrupt, and the Great Depression of the 1930s only made matters worse. Just as France's situation reached an all-time low, Germany began to experience an upswing. These economic woes, coupled with Germany's resurgence as a major power, directly translated to France's sphere of influence diminishing. Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia, once allies and trade partners, now looked elsewhere for support. To make matters worse, the problems of the French military apparatus was exacerbated by the civilian sector's increasingly tight hold on the army and bureaucracy. This was the result of a political divide between the extreme left Popular Front and the centre-right coalition, with both sides trying to secure as many military positions as possible to prevent one side from using the military against the other. In short, loyalty was prized over competence, and as a result, bureaucrats with minimal military experience were promoted over experienced generals. Furthermore, the French military philosophy was fundamentally flawed in the 1930s. The French constructed the Maginot Line on the Franco-German border as part of its defence strategy, but as historians put it best, the Maginot Line was a formidable barrier, not so much against the German army as French understanding of modern war. The French military strength during the Second World War heavily influenced by their belief in the impenetrability of the Maginot Line, a defensive fortification built along the border. Despite being touted as an unbreachable barrier, the line had weak points, and in 1940 Hitler's forces were able to infiltrate through the Ardennes forest. Due to France's assumption that the rough terrain would deter any tank attacks, this flawed military philosophy of prioritising strength across the entire front line ultimately led to their defeat, as the German strategy focused on strengthening key points and launching coordinated attacks with fast, light vehicles, dive bombers, and fighters, a strategy later coined by the Western media as Blitzkrieg, the worst possible situation for the French. Now that we have examined the French and German military philosophies, let's take a closer look at the military equipment to determine how much it influenced the German victory. When comparing the military equipment of France and Germany during World War II, it is clear that France held certain advantages in certain areas. For example, French infantry was in some ways superior to German infantry. The French had superior numbers and supply lines, and their infantry was more motorised and outfitted with modern equipment than the German infantry. Additionally, French armour should have also enjoyed an advantage over its German counterparts. The French Char B1 heavy tank was virtually impenetrable on the front. and the Suma S-35 medium tank had more durable armour than the German Panzers. However, one could argue that Germany used its tanks more effectively. Germany's tank battalions were composed of independent, lightly armoured tank divisions, and as previously discussed, their speed was harnessed to surprise the French, which led to the perfection of their blitzkrieg. The Germans also enjoyed wireless technology, with each tank being equipped with radio receivers to relay and mobilise battalions at a pace that the French, who still use flags instead of radios, simply couldn't match. When it comes to their air forces, the French arme de l'air was at a disadvantage despite high levels of French aircraft production. When comparing the air forces of France and Germany leading up to World War II, despite high levels of French aircraft production, the French had very few spare parts for their aircraft, and as a result, they could neither prepare nor repair their planes for service as quickly as the Germans. However, the French fighters generally outperformed their German counterparts, with 2 German fighters being shot down for every 1 French fighter. The French had a variety of aircraft in their arsenal, such as the MS-406, which was a fast and agile fighter, and the D-520, which was a more heavily armed and armoured option. The Germans, on the other hand, had a much smaller number of aircraft, but made up for it with higher quality of planes. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Messerschmitt Bf-110 were both highly advanced and effective fighters. The Bf-109 was particularly notable for its agility and speed, while the 110 was a more heavily and armoured option like the D-520 on their French counterparts. When it came to bombing, the German Luftwaffe had a clear advantage. The German HE-111 and the D-017 were both fast and heavily armed bombers that could drop huge payloads of bombs with immaculate precision. The French, on the other hand, had a lack of heavy bombers in their arsenal, and their bombers were not as fast or as heavily armed as the German planes, leading to a French over-reliance on British and American planes. For example, the Lancaster bomber and the B-29 bomber. But overall, whilst the French had a slight advantage in terms of their fighter aircraft, the German Air Force was superior in terms of the quality of their aircraft and the effectiveness of their bombers. The effectiveness of their bombers was also shown during the Blitz in 1940, where Germany relentlessly bombed London and other industrial cities in England. This superiority in air power was a major factor in Germany's ability to quickly conquer much of Europe during the early stages of World War II, allowing the French to look merely impotent in the process. Although the French are remembered for their role in World War II as having a strong resistance movement against the German occupation, they can also tend to be remembered for their quick collapse of the military in the face of the German invasion in 1940. However, this was a similar story for most of Europe, with Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark and Norway all falling to the Germans in similar fashion. This led to the occupation of France by Germany, which lasted until 1944, where shortly after the D-Day landings on June the 6th, France was liberated by their allies. The French are also remembered for their collaboration with the Germans during the occupation, which is a controversial topic in French history and a story for another video. Despite the defeat, the French resistance played a significant role in the liberation of France, and the French soldiers and citizens who fought against the German occupation are celebrated as heroes. So it was not all bad in the end. Thank you guys for watching.